When I bought my first old house, the upstairs hallway sounded like a haunted ship. Every step produced a different squeak, groan, or creak. You could track me walking across the second floor just by the sound patterns. A handyman quoted me $1,100 to pull up the carpet in the hallway, drive screws into the subfloor, and relay the carpet. I love that hallway, but not $1,100 worth. I asked him what actually causes floor squeaks. He explained. I drove to the hardware store, bought a small bottle of something that cost about $3, and silenced the entire hallway in about 45 minutes without touching the carpet. Been silent ever since. So let me show you what causes floor squeaks, and the surprisingly cheap, simple fix that handles most of them. First, what causes floor squeaks? Wooden floors and subfloors squeak for one basic reason. Wood components are rubbing against each other, or against a fastener, and that friction produces sound. The specifics vary by floor type. In hardwood floors, squeaks usually come from boards rubbing against each other, or rubbing against the nails that hold them down, especially when wood has shrunk over time due to humidity changes, leaving small gaps that let the boards move. In carpeted floors over plywood subfloor, squeaks come from the subfloor flexing slightly under foot traffic, pulling the subfloor away from the joists and pushing back down, letting the nails or screws holding the subfloor to the joists move in their holes. It's the nail shaft sliding against the wood around it that makes the sound. In laminate or engineered floors, squeaks come from the locking mechanisms at the board edges, rubbing against each other when the floor flexes. In all three cases, the fundamental issue is micro-movement plus friction. If you can either stop the movement or reduce the friction, the squeak goes away. The professional approaches tend to focus on stopping the movement. Drive screws through the subfloor into the joists to eliminate flex. Face nail hardwood boards that are loose. Replace failing laminate sections. All of these work but require pulling up the floor covering, which is labor intensive. The DIY approach that works on most common squeaks addresses the friction side. You add lubrication or a dry friction reducer between the rubbing surfaces. And for finish nail squeaks in hardwood, you also stabilize the nail slightly. The $3 product that handles most of this is powdered graphite or talc. Or, for some cases, simple baby powder. Here's what you need. A small container of powdered graphite, about $3 at a hardware store, usually in the key section or locksmithing area. Alternatively, baby powder or talc, about $3 at any pharmacy. A syringe or a small squeeze bottle with a thin spout, optional for precise application. A putty knife. For specific repair kits, a product called Squeaky No. More, about $30, which is a specialty product for carpeted floors but is worth knowing about. Wood glue and a pack of 1 more 4-inch dowels, about $5 combined, optional for gap filling. Let me walk you through fixing different types of squeaks for a squeaky hardwood floor. Sprinkle powdered graphite or talc along the seams between boards where the squeak originates. Work the powder into the cracks with your finger, or a soft cloth, pushing it down into the gap. Walk over the area. The powder settles into the space between the boards and reduces friction as they rub. Listen for changes in the squeak pattern. Apply more if needed. Within 10 to 20 minutes, most squeaks are silenced. For squeaks that are very localized to 1 or 2 specific boards, try a small amount of lemon oil or even a drop of mineral oil along the seam. The oil penetrates into the rub zone and silences the friction. Be careful not to apply too much because oil can stain some finishes. Test on an inconspicuous board first. For really stubborn hardwood squeaks where a specific board has pulled loose, you can drive a small finish nail through the board into the joist below at an angle, called toenailing. Pre-drill a tiny pilot hole to avoid splitting the board. Drive the finish nail, sink the head with a nail set, fill the hole with matching wood putty, wipe smooth. This silences loose board squeaks permanently. For carpeted floor squeaks over a plywood subfloor, locate the joist nearest the squeak. You can find joists by tapping with a hammer, using a stud finder, or, in a pinch, by looking at where the subfloor nails or screws are visible if you pull back the carpet slightly at a corner. Once you've located the joist, drive a long screw through the carpet, through the subfloor, into the joist. This pulls the subfloor tight against the joist and eliminates the flex. The specialty product Squeaky No More is designed exactly for this, with a special screw that has a scored break-off point so the head can be broken off after driving, leaving the screw body invisible beneath the carpet. But a regular deck screw with the head tapped below the carpet surface works fine as a DIY alternative. For a carpeted floor, where you don't want to drive screws through the carpet, you can go into the space below the floor if it's accessible. Go into the basement or crawl space, look up at the subfloor, identify where it's sagging or has gaps between itself and the joist, and drive screws up from below through the joist into the subfloor. Or, for a more specialized fix, wedge-tapered wooden shims coated. With wood glue into any gaps between the joist and subfloor, then trim the shim flush. Both approaches eliminate the movement that causes the squeak. For laminate floor squeaks. These are harder to fix because you can't easily access the locking mechanism. The easiest approach is to dust powdered graphite or talc into the seams between planks. Pay special attention to transitions near walls, where flooring contractors often leave slightly more flex. If the squeak persists and is severe, you may need to pull up the floor in that section and address the underlayment or the specific planks causing the problem. But graphite or talc handles most minor cases. Step by step for the most common scenario: a squeaky hardwood or engineered wood floor. Step 1. Walk the floor slowly and identify the specific spots that squeak. Mark them with painter's tape. Step 2. Sprinkle a small amount of powdered graphite, talc, or baby powder along the seams near the squeak. Step 3. Use your finger, a soft brush, or a cloth to work the powder down into the seam. The goal is for the powder to get between the boards and lubricate the contact points. Step 4. Walk over the area repeatedly. This helps the powder work its way further into the seam. Listen for squeak changes. Add more powder if the squeak persists. Step 5. For areas that still squeak after powder, investigate whether a specific board is loose. Press down on individual boards near the squeak. If you feel a board flex or move under light pressure, that board is loose and may need a finish nail or screw to stabilize. Step 6. Clean up. Sweep or vacuum any excess powder off the surface. Now some honest notes. Graphite works indefinitely. It doesn't wash out or dry up. Once you've applied it to a squeak, it typically stays silent for years, unless something changes structurally. Baby powder and talc last a shorter time, perhaps months to a year, because they're softer and can migrate out of the seam. If you want a longer-term fix, graphite is the better choice. Not every floor squeak can be fixed from above. If the subfloor has rotten sections, if joists have settled, or if the original installation was poor, you may need structural repairs to address the underlying issue. For severe widespread squeaks, a carpenter can often diagnose the root cause and offer a targeted fix. For newer construction homes where squeaks develop over time, the issue is often just nail heads popping slightly as the wood dries and shrinks over the first few years. Redriving any visible nail heads and adding small finish nails or screws to loose spots usually solves it. For very old houses with wide plank original flooring, some squeaks are part of the character and aren't worth chasing. A powder treatment quiets most without altering the look of the floor. The economic comparison is simple. $3 of powder versus $1,100 of carpeted floor rescrewing, or versus thousands to refinish hardwood. For most homes, the DIY fix handles 90% of squeak problems for pocket change. The professional work is reserved for the remaining 10% where structural issues are real. One more interesting trick. For squeaky interior doors on older hinges, the same powdered graphite works. Sprinkle a small amount onto the hinge pin, work the door open and closed a few times, and the squeak vanishes. This is actually the original intended use of powdered graphite, as a locksmith's lubricant. Applied to any metal-on-metal friction point, it outperforms WD-40 in the long run, because it doesn't dry out or attract dust the way oil does. If your house has been singing under your feet for years, set aside an hour this weekend. Identify the squeaky spots, dust them with powder, walk it in. By the time you're done with coffee, the squeaks are gone, and every time you walk that hallway, you'll be glad you didn't. Pay someone $1,100 for what a $3 bottle solved.